Welcome. In this week's episode, we're talking about Pathfinder Remaster and how Paizo is ending their bad romance with D&D and Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and whoever the hell else they want to call themselves. So saddle up. Let's get started. Brent, one of your favorite topics, separating from D&D, finding new greener pastures. This is kind of a big deal for them to do the Pathfinder Remaster. It's my understanding that they had always kind of intended to do some sort of remaster and kind of go through and do a line by line revision of all of their content to make sure that they had scrubbed D&D out of it. But the OGL thing really accelerated this process.
Was that their intention? I had never heard that was actually their intention.
It was like, you know how they put those those like what are those, like the road maps to the future and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You'd never want to. I mean, it doesn't. It's a weird prospect to have this business that you've built beholden entirely to an unrelated company. So yeah, that is weird. But yeah, the OGL, I think really quickened people's pace, especially Pathfinder's pace, on eliminating a lot of those artifacts from D&D. And the remastered, from what I've read about and what I've seen, it seems like Remastered has gone a long way to really do that. Because I think really, and I've said this on past podcasts, I think now what people need to understand is they tried it didn't work. There was too much outrage, whatever. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to try and do this again at some point. Like, I almost guarantee at some point down the road, they're going to hope things are quieter and they're going to try and push. And this is a lot of guesswork on my part, but I think they're going to push another edition at some point. And
I don't think that's guesswork.
And well, they keep lauding the forever edition of D&D, right? But they're going to push another edition at some point. In that edition, they're going to try and make sure it doesn't have any OGL features at all. I'm pretty sure. And so they can take all those hooks out, because seeing how popular Pathfinder became after they released 4th edition had to have been like the biggest kick in the hojos that they've had in a long time, because Pathfinder passing them for sales at one point was probably really scary as a business. Well, yeah. And then to have all these other propagated businesses that are now making money off of what they consider their property. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, they might stay. I mean, not to make this about Wizards, they might stay with their Forever Edition if they can monetize every hour that you play, that you and your group play. If they can create the killer tabletop, and you have to pay your $5 an hour or whatever the hell it is, $20 a month for every player and $25 for I don't know what it's going to be, but that has to be the play there. I think Paizo's smart separating themselves. I mean, as a 10,000 foot view.
Yeah. And if they go ahead, say Jeff, sorry.
No, you already said it. Wizards tried it once. There's nothing to believe that they're not going to try it again. And I mean, and their two biggest targets have to be Critical Role and Paizo. Those are the two companies making the most money, and I don't even think it's close after that. But
yeah, I wouldn't be able to say. And just as kind of a recap, so people have context in what's happening here, is that Wizards of the Coast obviously makes Dungeons and Dragons, the biggest role playing game in the universe, and Paizo makes Pathfinder. Pathfinder was basically a game that was started. What's that?
It's number 2, I think. Still, Pathfinder is.
Yeah. It's the number 2 in the spot, and it was basically built off of D&D, because when D&D went down the road of 4th edition, Pathfinder became 3.75, I believe, was the original iteration, and everything along those lines.
I think that's what the people call it.
So it borrowed a lot from the original edition. And when you borrow as much as they had in their game, kind of under the guise of the orc, I mean, it was, or not orc, but the OGL. I mean, it was really an amazing product to have been created from, the Wizards properties.
I think it was less borrowed and gifted. Like Wizards gifted this open gaming license to people and said, make stuff with our properties so you can basically make our business bigger. And now they've seen what they've seen. The downside of that is people have started to make actual livings on it now.
Yeah, people moved into areas that I don't think they could see when the original OGL came out. And they even like 4th edition had something different. It's not covered under the same OGL. And I mean, I think the writing was on the wall when Paizo, in response to the OGL scandal earlier in the year, created what they're calling the ORC license, the ORC, that if they're going to gift their content out to other people to create products to make their product line bigger, it has to be an original product then, right?
Yeah.
You'd think so.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not a lawyer.
Our reference document references this other reference document.
Yeah.
Well, and the weird part about it is that this is where all the lawyers start, kind of cross-referencing documents and everything like that, because you really can't be beholden to so many licenses. There's no real compatibility between the ORC and the OGL, based on my understanding. And so, so it's interesting because they decided to do this remaster, and they had to do a lot of rewriting to go through this. And I think the interesting part is that because it's not really necessarily the name, it's like the mechanics themselves, the underlying mechanics obviously are not copyrightable according to many people on the internet. So that what they had to do is they had to rewrite and express those things in wholly unique ways. And so for those people that want just the boiled down version of it, I mean, really what they had to do is they had to go line by line through here. And so what you'd see is that, a dwarf is still a dwarf, because a dwarf isn't a Wizards of the Coast creation. I mean, that's something that they've incorporated into their lore, but it predates them by quite a bit. But when they got to Tiefling and Aasimar, now in the new book, they're Nephilim. So that's their new name. They're now just any outer being or any ancestry that has that, or heritage, I should say. They are now Nephilim. Now half-orcs are now considered Iuvarian, half-orcs are Dromar, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see that, these books kind of are the next stage in the game, in so much as that now every book after this point have to use this new terminology, and every book prior to this point is going to have old terminology. So that's going to be kind of a little bit of a pain in the ass, because and then they also had to rewrite things to make sure that the expressions of these rules were wholly unique from everything that they had. But the interesting thing then is it does put all of these rules, the Pathfinder 2nd edition remaster, and it puts them all into the ORC license. So if you want to use these expressions for rules and stuff like that, I believe you can use the expressions according to the ORC license. You just can't use the setting of Galarian in your game. Now, there is something called Pathfinder and Starfinder Infinite, which has a separate license, which is weird. And I don't know if you guys caught that, but
I didn't, but I haven't looked into it. So.
But the Pathfinder Infinite and the Starfinder Infinite is kind of its own walled garden, and ORC content can't go into it. It's very strange. So if you want to make stuff in the Pathfinder Infinite, you kind of are existing in your own little walled garden ecosystem, and you can use the Galarian setting, but you can't then export it out. It's very weird. It's like,
that is kind of strange. Yeah.
It's like, why would Paizo create a separate ecosystem for Infinite? Isn't that kind of antithetical to the open gaming? I mean, I don't know, but
I don't know. You know, I'm for the most part, I'm on the Let's Go Paizo side of this whole thing. You know,
they've done so much with this that it's like, and since I don't create content for Pathfinder Infinite, that I'm not going to be splitting hairs with the different licensing agreements there or anything like that. But it is interesting that they also chose, and this is something that I thought was unique about ORC, was that it's not by them. It's separate from them. They can't revise it. That was created in conjunction with a lot of feedback from a lot of different companies. So
I think the other thing that the remastered, to get away a little bit from my habit of shitting on Hasbro, I think the other cool thing about the revision or remaster of Pathfinder is it's given them an opportunity to modernize some things that I think a game like Dungeons and Dragons or a game like Pathfinder needed. One of the things that I was so happy to read about was alignment systems are not removed entirely, but downplayed fairly heavily, because I feel like that's definitely not something. I don't know. It's not something I feel is necessary in modern gaming anymore.
Who has been? I mean, in all the games we've played, like alignments have been really, really downplayed, because some of them hem you in as to exactly how you can play your character, and most people, while their primary thrust may be within one of those boxes, they do a lot of things outside the boxes for various reasons. I think that's a vestigial thing. Like the 3d6 to roll your stuff. Like, it doesn't matter that your strength is 18. It matters that your ability modifier is +4.
Right, which they've also changed. They
Yeah.
took out
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, they took out the big numbers, which I think is also good. Getting back to the alignment system,
Yeah.
the other thing is, like, I think it's really vestigial because I think it was really just like it was necessary for game mechanics back in first and second edition. Like you had your detect evil, your detect good, your detect lawful, your detect neutral, and all your alignment magic items and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people just don't act in such a 9-box grid anymore.
Right.
Even when you want living characters, and that's why I think narrative games have been on the rise more. I'm back to shitting on D&D again.
Well, I mean, so what's interesting about the role-playing component of that is that it basically at least gives you a main dogma that your character is supposed to follow. Now, we all know that your character isn't going to 100% follow this dogma every time, but it was one of those things where, and I want to say there was a game that actually, like, I know you see it in the role-playing games where you make decisions and it will alter your alignment kind of, according to the decisions you make, and you can't, you'll lean more towards lawful good or chaotic good or something like that. But I remember there being like a chart, I thought, in one of the games, maybe it was Dragonlance or something, where you actually marked off like non-alignment decisions, and so you actually, like, if you were a paladin and you needed to have a lawful good alignment, you would actually lose your paladin hood as part of your story.
You're supposed to, like, that's technically, like, you're supposed to as a GM, and most of the like DM guides, it says if you have a player who isn't acting out up to their alignment, especially somebody like a paladin who's beholden to their alignment, like, you're supposed to tell them that they could lose spells or get things changed or stuff like that.
Well, it was always so funny because it's just like when you say lawful good, like, then the person goes, well, which society's laws? Checkmate, DM, like.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, there were always those like semantic arguments that you could have, be like, well, I mean, I guess you're following a law, and if the law says kill all peasants, I guess, yep.
So here's something I don't say very often. In Rifts, they had the Cyber Knight, which was their like paladin equivalent, and their thing was they had a code that was written out that they had to go by, and I think that was a really good idea for that sort of like chivalrous character, with like having a code you have to live by. And I think that's probably a better implementation of the paladin.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. Like it doesn't matter necessarily if it's on your code and you follow it, great. And if it's not on your code and you do something, freewheel it, then you're fine.
What sort of world do we live in where I just complimented Rifts and I shit on D&D all the time?
Well,
the modern one. The modern one.
I can't tell you what timeline we're in, Brent, but it's definitely a weird one.
I need to get my mega damage t-shirts.
Now that I would love to see. I don't. Is it mega damage? Is that like? Because I know you can get like emotional damage if you watch enough YouTube, but like mega damage, is that copyrighted or trademarked? I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Rifts has I'm pretty sure Palladium has it copyrighted. Actually, I believe I've seen it in the when I used to have the books. I believe in the tiny text at the bottom where it says it said mega damage TM. I'm pretty sure it was there.
Well, you could say that's some, and you could italicize the mega damage. And since it's a phrase, I don't know if you'd be. I mean, that's 50% more words or whatever.
It's 50. That's true. It's not plagiarism.
50% more.
It's 50% more words.
I think that also goes on a T-shirt. If we ever got that merch, or no,
new T-shirt now with 50% more words.
Wow.
The ultimate consumerist society. How is this game? Well, it has 60% more words. Best game ever. More filling.
So it has the thickest rule book wins. Is that where we're at?
So speaking of rule book sizes, another thing about Pathfinder is they split their books in half. There's the player core now, and there's the GM core, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and there will have to be a player core 2 probably because they only have 8 classes in this player core book. They're missing 4 of the other classes.
I think they're going to be in the DM core.
Are they?
Yeah, I think the more detailed ones are going to be in the DM core.
Maybe I know that. So like, because there was,
I thought I've been watching stuff, and I thought that's what was mentioned, that it was some of the less basic classes.
Well, I think that would be good because I heard somebody say that there would be other additional books that would have them in them, but it would be good if they were in the DM guide, the more complex classes, advanced classes.
That might be true. I mean, I don't know like what their process is going to be because it's funny because they simplified some things and I mean, Pathfinder is already a fairly complicated system, not necessarily because of how it plays, but because of the number of rules that you have to follow.
Yeah, it's a crunchy game.
And so it's interesting to see. I would be curious to see if people feel like it's reduced the crunch at all these minor changes that they're making to all these kind of things. It'll be
from what I've heard and seen, they said no, it's the same. I mean, it's Pathfinder. It's just as crunchy as it was before.
I don't think their aim is to take out the crunch. I think it's to be the same game, but like some of the updates, I did hear stuff like we want the character sheet to not look like a tax form.
Yeah,
kind of thing. So that I think because that's one of the things in the games we've been playing, the more storyteller, types of games, rules light stuff. The character sheets are relatively simple, and they let me just play.
Yeah, super simple.
Yeah, you don't, and you don't have to do it because a lot of the character decisions are incorporated into the sheet in some cases too. Like Monster of the Week was a perfect example of your character was more than just a set of stats. It was decisions about your character that helped you really just immerse yourself in them right out of the gate.
And the over the edge character sheet almost feels like you don't need it.
Yeah, it's really basic. And what I should do is and we probably forgot this, is that as a reminder, Mondays. See us on Mondays, live stream. If you're, no matter what day this is, see them on Monday.
It's the Monday.
It's the Mondays. Unless something changes. We do take breaks every once in a while because we're people. So I guess one of the questions that is always interesting, and I think that, instead of necessarily talking about, what they changed, because I obviously don't want to go through a line by line change. There's actually a really good Reddit post of somebody putting together an Excel spreadsheet that it's literally like what it was, what it will be.
I know there's no more owlbears. I heard they took owlbears out.
Yeah, I heard they took drow out. I was going to research that a little bit, but basically drow got the.
Well, I think anything that, like, I'm guessing dark elves can't be something that Wizards created.
Correct.
but drow, and I don't even know if they're going to use dark elves because it feels like some of the stuff that I've read about, and we're not here to discuss the minutia. We'd be talking for the next 3 days straight, and nobody would watch the episode. It seems like they're going a long way to distance themselves from stuff, and if Wizards owns owlbear, I'm sure that Paizo can come up with squirrel bear, and
this is our eagle bear.
Yes,
not an owlbear.
Legally
it's the osprey bear, Brent, because that way it starts with O as well. Just
legally distinct.
I know people are gonna mow, and I know owlbears are loved, but
are they kind of assholes?
Well, yeah, but I people get kind of precious about owlbears.
They do. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people have died by an owlbear, so they have this like fond memory of getting torn apart by this aberration in the woods.
And it's such a weird thing. I'm sure some 14-year-old kid was like, "It's a bear with an owl face on it," and that's where the owlbear came from. But but I think drow is an interesting case because I mean, it is a Scottish word, but it meant troll at one point, so it's definitely not dark elves, so they probably do have hooks in that pretty deep.
They probably have, exactly. They don't have hooks into the word, but they have hooks into the concept, tied together with the word. Well, I don't know. I'm not an attorney on IP attorney, thank God.
Well,
but I think it's a unique specialization.
Yeah. I think that the thing about the drow is I'm not necessarily sure that it's because of the IP component. I think they took the drow out, and I could be misreading this, but I thought I read somewhere else that like they're kind of eliminating references to slavery in.
Oh yeah, they're
that.
also kind of problematic.
So they're kind of a problematic race for a lot of reasons, and
Sure.
so I mean, I could see them taking them entirely out and just being like, we just don't want to deal with that race. And I mean, I admit we've talked about those types of things on a previous episode. Like, I mean, I think you get a much more rich world when you have bad guys that are really bad, just for the sake of, like really, easy villains. I hate to call them that, but they don't follow the the typical rules. They have their own sets, and they're alien and foreign.
When it becomes problematic is when basically you say like all of their heritage is
the mono,
and I think that's
the monocultures or whatever they're called.
Yeah, exactly.
But I did see that they were also using this opportunity to like shed any previous stuff. And so like one example they gave is they're also going to look at like redoing dragons, because, they kind of paid homage to the chromatic and the gemstone or the metallic dragons that D&D had. But now they're like, screw that. We're taking those out. We're going to redefine what dragons are for our world and make them something more interesting than just what has always been the case. So I think it could be interesting to watch how this evolves and grows into its own thing, even more so than it is right now, because it seems like they've got all their cylinders firing and they're really going to start kind of creating a high fantasy setting that is entirely distinct from D&D. And that may be good or it may be bad. It's hard to say, because there may have been a lot of people that went to Pathfinder because there was just that familiarity. And now they get there and they're like, what the fuck is a Nephilim? Like...
I think the interesting thing is I think now Pathfinder has people that are Pathfinder players.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those people are always going to be champions for the product now, and I think that's who they're going to leverage. Whether or not we ever see Pathfinder in an episode of a show like Stranger Things or something like that, I don't know, but we can hope so.
Yeah. It's true. I think the only reason why D&D got the love of Stranger Things was timing wise. Like they just chose the game of the games that were available. D&D was 80s, the game.
Well, until something happens, D&D is going to be, if people think tabletop role playing, they're going to think D&D. They're not going to think, some of the indie games that we know about.
Yeah,
Lasers and Friendship is probably not going to be the role playing game.
Lasers and Spaceships, Friendship, Lasers and Feelings,
Lasers and Feelings. That's what it was.
Yeah,
Lasers and Friendship sounds closer.
It does.
To Feelings.
So here's one thing that was kind of an interesting talking point, and I kind of was curious as to your guys' take, because what's interesting is we saw these things happening in parallel, and I'm starting to get self-conscious about the use of the word interesting. But we're seeing these things in parallel, is that 1D&D seems like it was an absolute shit show, dumpster fire, wet garbage, durian fruit mess thing. And I can't use enough bad adjectives, because it feels like everything soured very quickly on the 1D&D playtest and kind of how that was received. But then the remaster seems like it was received quite differently. Where do you think some of those differences come from, in your opinions?
Do you want to go, Jeff?
I'm still trying to parse all that.
So why do you think Paizo was able to successfully launch a remaster that's quite good, but then also it seems like D&D was not able to launch 1D&D to any sort of fanfare? Well, I mean, it's not even launched. It's still
in playtest. Go ahead, Brent. I got a one-line answer.
One reason is because they didn't have this joke of a polling system for their fans. Like the way that it was handled by Wizards, the D&D rollout of 1D&D, instead of making decisions, they just kept throwing out these documents that were like, "Hey, we want to know what you think," but it was just really a lie. Like in our examinations earlier of like how these sort of like customer polls work, like that information all seemed like bullshit. And then they had people coming out and being like, "No one reads them," so instead of making decisions, which is what a company should do, they had this book creation by council that didn't even matter. There was a lot of weird decisions externally trying to bring players in that just weren't genuine. And I think that really come across a lot, in my opinion.
Well, and the weird part too is, I think, to add to that, is there was a lot of walkbacks There was there was definitely 3 steps forward, 4 steps backwards, 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 6 steps backwards. And I think what the nail in the coffin for me was in the 1D&D was like literally at the end of this, by the way, you can still use the player's handbook from 2015.
Oh yeah.
Like that, we're not going to get away from it so much that you can't just use all your previous stuff. So you could have a fighter from the 2014 player's handbook and a ranger from the new 1D&D 2024 book, and everything will be hunky dory. And I was like, really? Doesn't seem logical.
Well, yeah, the weirder case on that for me was if you're playing, say, a druid, right? Because there's some big changes to that class from 2015. And I'm playing a druid from 2023 or 2024, whenever these freaking things come out. Your experience and my experience will be very different, even though we're supposedly the same class.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like one will be changing into a lot of cool animals, and the other one will just look like a lot of cool animals with very strange stats.
Honestly, I think the difference, I mean, and this is simplifying it, but as my grandfather used to say, I'm not sure that Wizards of the Coast at this time can find their ass with both hands. Like I just they don't seem to. I like the idea of getting feedback from the players. I like the idea of improving the game and making it better for everyone. But if it becomes a popularity contest and it's the number of votes, then unfortunately, in my mind, you are designing for the lowest common denominator. And the more you do that, the more vanilla, the more watered down your product becomes, or the more supercharged, I guess, if you want to go to the other end of the extreme, right? Everybody just wants power creep.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like the right way to introduce the feedback.
Or if you make a creative decision, like they tried to do a couple times, it comes across like what you're doing is disingenuous to the players. Like I think it was a bad decision. You know.
Well, and honestly,
in a long list of bad decisions, like there's a host of bad decisions,
right?
Like the OGL coming out in the middle of their 1D&D playtesting wasn't super good for 1D&D.
No, and I mean, if you look at the relative size, Wizards of the Coast is a subsidiary of Hasbro, or however the ownership works.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast probably isn't. It's probably big because of Magic. It's probably bigger than Paizo, but it's not as big as it's not so much bigger than Hasbro is. Hasbro's got to answer to all of these shareholders, and they've got a product line that's not producing like it used to, and they're at the point you can tell they're finger pointing, going, "Who's eating our lunch?" You know what I mean? I feel like we're in, what was the oil well movie with Daniel Day-Lewis? You know, where I drink your milkshake. Well, it's one of the things they used to do, like in the oil fields. Like, I own a lease next to yours, but mine's dry, but yours isn't. So instead of digging down, I dig like this onto your property, and then I drink your milkshake.
That's fair,
right? Somebody's drinking Hasbro, at least from Hasbro's, like, because you know how we've all worked for large companies. You know how this division reporting shit works. Well, the whole company's up 52%. You know, we'd be up 75%, Mike, if it wasn't for your division.
Yeah.
You know, and they're trying to find all these ways to monetize stuff, and they're finding the old ways aren't working. And then they look around and they go, how in the hell is Critical Role earning $10 million a year just off of Twitch or whatever, reportedly? I don't know. And they deserve everything they make. I don't care. But from Wizards' standpoint, they're doing is playing our game, and we're getting nothing from that. But it seems to really grind their gears.
It does. And unfortunately, they don't have anybody smart enough to go, we should advertise these shows and make VODs of them and put them on when people care and not hide them from everybody.
We should sponsor them. We should get involved in any way that we can. We could have. Do you think they could have gotten in on the ground floor, Brent? Could they have gotten back in the day, like when Geek and Sundry sold, right? Could Wizards have gotten in for 20-25%? Like
probably.
Maybe, I don't know. And maybe they had their dream and they were able to self-finance it. I don't know. I'm not trying to short shirt Critical Role, but somebody at Wizards just seems stuck in the past. They've got managers managing managers, managing managers, managing managers, and nobody managing people.
Some of Wizards' decisions remind me of something that happened with Games Workshop when I was big into 40K. There's this moment where they hired the CEO who said, "We don't really make games, we make models." And so, like, they took out most of the support of a couple of their games. That was when, like, they blew up the old world and everything, and Sigmar started and everything. And they made all these changes, and then their sales dropped like a rock because people were interested in the stories, not just, yes, their models are top shelf. But that's not that's not the only reason buy. That's not the people that buy models just to paint models aren't as many people as people who buy them to play the game.
Right.
And like
or
they
who
just
love the story, who love the mythos behind that character, and they're like, I always wanted to paint this guy.
Yeah, so something's lost completely in translation between the two, where like they're losing the line somewhere between. And like I really do think, like, watch the last episode for us to discuss this, but just what happened with the D&D Adventure channel like speaks to me of just how they don't understand new media at all. Like making a show and having it just play like a TV show at a specific time is such a thing that doesn't happen anymore. Like, yes, I can see having it do that and then putting a VOD up of it later or something like that, but just doing that even for your first month as you build that whole thing, like you should have videos of like put videos of the players up, do interviews with the players and put those up on demand, on video on demand.
Ask videos them of why they love Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, or put something else up there that you can watch video on demand to prepare you for these shows. And instead
there's nothing.
They just made it so hard. So,
and I think we can get one more dig in here, and I think that like the one thing that's really kind of annoying is that I like D&D and I play D&D a lot in my life, and I feel like at some point, because we were excited, like when we first started the channel and we were kind of timing it, and somehow it timed with the one D&D playtest. There was a lot of excitement. I think both Brent and I, because this is before Jeff, you started talking with us on the weekly.
Yeah, I joined late. I'm always late to the party.
It's okay. But we were actually, we were playing D&D. That we still had a D&D game running at the time, and we had played D&D pretty exclusively for the past few years up until that point. And then all of a sudden the one D&D stuff started coming out. And in the beginning, I think that the hype was there because you're like, oh, it's kind of unknown, and you really didn't know what was happening. You were excited because there was going to be a new edition. You might have some long-standing issues with the game that might finally be addressed if they're going to kind of keep the core but just fix it up a little bit. And it felt like at some point they really it didn't really feel like they were doing the 1D&D playtest to fix anything. They wanted you to know about their story and how much you should adore it because of the longevity of the brand and the people. And they wanted your feedback about things, maybe. And then they kind of they didn't seem to have a cohesive vision about what they actually wanted to accomplish with it. And as soon as the like veneer of newness kind of wore off, you just kind of were like, what the hell is actually happening here? And I mean, if you applied any critical thinking to it, you're like, this is not really how you create a new edition. And it kind of left a sour taste. And it just happened to coincide with so many other bad things that it really was just like, Whereas like Pathfinder Remaster is like, I bet you could scope that out pretty easy. We want to take out all the OGL stuff. We want to fix some problematic things that we have. We want to maybe, create some newness with some of our stuff that we hadn't created before. And we want to split our books in two. Okay.
It feels like one company knows what they want to do and the other company is really spending money and flinging everything they can at the wall. And Brent, you made a good point. Like, you said that Wizards of the Coast Hasbro doesn't understand new media. And I think you're 100% right, because they're still trying to hang on to old media revenue streams. This is the thing that scares these big corporations. They see the revenue from new media, but the monetization is entirely different. It's 100% different. And they don't understand how they can reach this without giving up this, because they don't want to give up this. Because this is money in hand. Sorry, I don't know if the hand gestures are actually helping the analogy. Yeah, sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I
We're not making
get
fun of you.
excited. I talk with my hands. I love this business shit. But
no.
they don't understand how it works. How they don't have somebody there that's got a freaking marketing degree from a top-notch university that goes, well, this is how this,
But they
I'm going to
tried.
give some up to get the new.
They tried, though. They tried to bring in that Microsoft CEO, but I can't say substantially what they've done to modernize their approach or anything. And I mean, admittedly, I have followed Wizards less and less over the past few months. Like I mean, I'll catch them glance in their direction, kind of like a jilted lover. But past that, I'm not really following them as closely as I used to. So,
and from what I understand, that Microsoft CEO was mainly there to help with their VTT implementation.
Oh, maybe.
Like that's what I heard. I heard from reading. Like that's why they brought him in, is to try and help with the video gamification of.
Well, yeah, because I think that's the revenue stream that they're going all in on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
But something like, and I know we have to end soon, but I have to say this. Like, but something so logical as Twitch works because people live stream and they put up VODs of their product. That's the key to making a channel like Real Plays Work.
If you want to see the new Twitch, you simply copy the old Twitch.
yeah, exactly. Just and
Wasn't
they
that
just
what Kick did? Like, didn't Kick just copy?
Yeah.
And that's what the platform that we are on and love right now is. They're with their live streaming and multiple platform implementation, which is wonderful, by the way. If any of them listen,
the AI is listening. But don't worry.
Like that's why YouTube's such a big thing, is people can get on it and they can watch the show anytime they want.
Anytime.
And having that and missing that by not just a little, but missing it by leagues, like in 2024 or almost 2024, is amazing to me. Like, well, like a couple of videos I saw where they would go to the site and they would click on the link and it would just go to a dead link. It didn't even go to like an advertisement for the show. It just went to a 404 error page. Like who?
Yeah, nobody. You launched. Somebody launched this webpage and nobody clicked on a button.
Yeah, like.
Well, having launched web pages for corporate entities before, there are a lot of hands in those cookie jars. Or if there's not a lot of hands in the cookie jars, that could also be your problem.
That could also be the problem.
One guy's working 98-hour weeks.
I mean,
IT is Red Bull.
So here's the thing. IT are usually the heroes of most of these stories because they're underappreciated and understaffed, and they're usually doing amazing things in spite of all these typical shortcomings. And so it wouldn't surprise me that they were, and I don't want to say that this is what happened, but it wouldn't surprise me that they were like, oh yeah, the partner that we had that managed this section of the page, we let them go because we were getting a new partner and we just don't have anybody in the meantime. Like,
yeah.
So, but with that being said, needless to say, if you're interested in Pathfinder and want to see what's on the other side, Pathfinder, they released 2 books, the Player Core and the GM Core. They look really solid from what I've seen. I haven't picked them up yet because all of my money went into Black Friday shopping, but soon. And if you still like D&D, that's fine. You can like whatever soup you like. If you want to play D&D, play D&D. We're not here to stop you. We're just here to remind you of the apparent sordid history that they've had in the last 16 months.
Well, not just that, but always my goal is always to remind people that D&D is a great game, but sometimes it's not the game. Sometimes it's not the game to tell all the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah. Exactly. And there are other great games out there. And I think that's one of the things that we're doing, especially with the live plays where we're doing some like one shots of smaller, lesser known systems and having a blast. These have been some of the best role-playing experiences that I've had, just to touch on
just to sell it,
to sell what we're doing on Monday nights.
We're shelling a little for Monday nights, ladies and
gentlemen. But I've been having fun, and I haven't been playing D&D, and at one point my entire role-playing life was D&D.
I think that's all. I think that's me too. That's all of us.
I mean, I would say proportionally, if you look at that pie, D&D is still the biggest wedge.
If you love D&D, play D&D. Play what you love. But there are other things out there that I think you will love if you just look a little bit.
And we'll help you. It will help you find it. Wink. Indeed. Or something. So with that, Jeff, do you want to tell them how to find us when they're not looking for us on YouTube?
Yeah,
And
you can
Brent,
find us
send
on
off.
social media. We are at Rollwise on Threads, Twitter, not X. X is Twitter, or Twitter is X. YouTube and Facebook. YouTube and Facebook. That's what it says. So that's all at Rollwise. And then by email, it's rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you everybody for joining us. Roll well and roll wise. Bye, everybody.
See you later.
Thanks.